The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training facility as Sarah Chen adjusted the scope on her rifle for the third time. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Today was the day that would either make or break her military career, and she knew it. "Look what we have here," came a mocking voice from behind her. Sarah didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Sergeant Marcus Bulls Rodriguez had been making her life miserable since she arrived at the advanced sniper school 3 months ago. His reputation preceded him, a decorated marksman with over 200 confirmed kills in combat zones across 3 different countries. Sarah kept her focus on the rifle as Rodriguez approached with his usual entourage. There was Corporal James "Ghost" Williams, known for his ability to remain hidden for days in hostile territory. Next to him stood Specialist Tyler "Hawk" Morrison, whose eagle eyes could spot movement from distances that seemed impossible. The 4th member of their unofficial squad was Private First Class Danny "Viper" Jackson, who had earned his nickname for his lightning-fast reflexes and deadly accuracy. "I still can't believe they're letting a rookie take the qualification test with us," Rodriguez continued, his voice dripping with disdain. "Especially one who's been here for barely 3 months and has never seen real combat." Sarah finally turned to face them, her dark eyes steady despite the churning in her stomach. She was used to the comments about her gender, her age, and her lack of experience. At 22, she was indeed the youngest person to attempt the elite sniper qualification in the past 5 years. She was also the first woman to make it this far in the program. "The test is the same for everyone," she said quietly, her voice carrying just enough authority to show she wouldn't be intimidated. "Gender and experience don't change the physics of ballistics." Rodriguez laughed, a harsh sound that echoed across the shooting range. "Physics? You think this is about physics? This is about having ice water in your veins when someone is shooting back at you. This is about making split-second decisions that mean life or death for your unit. This is about proving you belong here when everything around you is chaos." The other 3 snipers nodded in agreement, their expressions ranging from amused to openly skeptical. Sarah had heard variations of this speech many times before. She understood their perspective. They had earned their positions through blood, sweat, and proven performance in the field. To them, she was just another trainee who might crack under pressure when it really mattered. "The qualification test will show if I belong here or not," Sarah replied, turning back to her rifle setup. "That's what tests are for." William stepped closer, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "Look, Chen, it's nothing personal. We've all seen promising shooters wash out when they face the real challenges. The distance shooting today isn't just about hitting targets. It's about proving you can perform under conditions that simulate actual combat scenarios." Sarah knew he was right about the test being challenging. The qualification required successful hits at ranges from 800 meters all the way out to 2,500 meters, with varying wind conditions, time pressures, and simulated combat stressors. What the squad didn't know was that she had been secretly practicing at even longer ranges during her off-duty hours. "I appreciate the concern," she said, checking her ammunition one final time. "But I didn't come this far to fail now." Morrison laughed and shook his head. "Confidence is good, but overconfidence will get you killed. There's a reason most people who attempt this qualification don't pass. The 2,500-meter shots alone eliminate about 70% of candidates." "What's the furthest shot you've ever made?" Jackson asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Sarah hesitated for a moment, knowing that her answer would either earn some respect or increase their mockery. "In training, about 1,800 meters, but I've been working on extending that range." The 4 men exchanged glances, and Rodriguez's smirk widened. 1,800 meters, and you think you're ready for 2,500? The difference between those distances isn't just about adding more elevation to your scope. Everything changes: wind, drift, bullet drop, even the rotation of the Earth starts to matter. "I know about the Coriolis effect," Sarah said, her patience beginning to wear thin. "I've studied the ballistics tables, practiced the calculations, and logged hundreds of hours on the simulator." "Simulator?" Williams repeated with a snort. "There's your problem right there. The simulator doesn't account for the unpredictability of real-world conditions. It doesn't simulate the pressure you feel when you know people are counting on you." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Master Sergeant Patricia Hayes, the chief instructor for the sniper qualification program. Hayes was a legend in military circles, a former Marine sniper with over 300 confirmed kills and a reputation for being absolutely unforgiving when it came to standards and performance. "Gentleman Chen," Hayes nodded to the group, "I trust you're all prepared for today's evaluation. This qualification test will determine who moves forward to the Advanced Combat Sniper program and who returns to their previous units." Rodriguez straightened slightly, his cocky demeanor shifting to professional respect in Hayes' presence. "We're ready, Master Sergeant, though I have to say I'm concerned about having an inexperienced shooter attempt the full qualification alongside proven marksmen." Hayes fixed Rodriguez with a stare that could cut steel. "Sergeant Rodriguez, if I wanted your opinion on who should or shouldn't be here, I would have asked for it. Everyone present has met the prerequisites for this test. Their performance today will speak for itself." Sarah felt a surge of gratitude toward Hayes, though she kept her expression neutral. The Master Sergeant had been tough but fair throughout the training program, never cutting her any slack, but also never treating her differently because of her gender. "The test will begin in 15 minutes, Hayes continued. "You'll be shooting at targets placed at 800, 1,200, 1,800, and 2,500 meters. Weather conditions are moderate today. Winds are currently at 8 to 12 miles per hour from the southwest, with occasional gusts up to 15. Temperature is 68 degrees Fahrenheit with 40% humidity." She paused, looking at each of them in turn. "You will have 3 shots at each distance, with a minimum score of 2 hits required at each range to pass. Miss more than 1 shot at any distance, and you fail the entire qualification. The 2,500-meter shots are where most candidates fail, so I suggest you pay particular attention to your wind calculations and bullet trajectory." Jackson raised his hand. "Master Sergeant, what's the longest successful shot in the history of this qualification?" Hayes allowed herself a small smile. "The record is held by a Navy SEAL who managed to hit all targets out to 2,800 meters during a special evaluation 5 years ago. However, today's test stops at 2,500 meters, which should be challenging enough for all of you." Rodriguez's confidence seemed to inflate even further at this information. He had successfully completed the qualification twice before, once during his initial certification and again during a recertification after returning from deployment. His personal best was a clean sweep at all required distances with 1 additional successful hit at 2,700 meters. "Time to move to the firing line," Hayes announced. "Chen, you'll be shooting from position 1, Rodriguez position 2, Williams position 3, Morrison position 4, Jackson position 5. Remember, this is not a competition between you, this is about meeting the standard. Focus on your own performance." Sarah gathered her equipment and walked to the designated firing position. The shooting platform was elevated about 10 feet above the ground, providing a clear line of sight across the vast training range. She could see the targets in the distance, small silhouettes that looked almost impossibly far away, especially the 2,500-meter target that appeared as little more than a speck on the horizon. As she set up her rifle and adjusted the bipod, Sarah could hear Rodriguez making jokes with the others about her chances. Part of her wanted to prove them wrong out of spite, but she forced herself to focus on the technical aspects of the challenge ahead. Anger and emotion would only hurt her accuracy. The rifle she was using was a precision-built .338 Lapua Magnum, capable of delivering devastating accuracy at extreme ranges when properly handled. She had spent countless hours familiarizing herself with this particular weapon, learning its unique characteristics and quirks. Every rifle was slightly different, and success at long-range shooting required an intimate understanding of how your specific weapon performed under various conditions. Sarah began her pre-shot routine, checking the scope adjustment, verifying her ammunition selection, and calculating the various factors that would affect bullet trajectory. The wind was the biggest variable. At 2,500 meters, even a slight miscalculation could cause a miss by several feet. "Shooters, prepare for the 800-meter sequence," Hayes announced over the range's public address system. "You may begin when ready." The 800-meter shots were considered the warm-up portion of the qualification. All 5 shooters completed this sequence without difficulty, their bullets striking the targets with precision. Sarah felt her confidence grow as her shots grouped tightly near the center of the target. "Moving to 1,200 meters," Hayes announced after verifying all hits. Adjust your positions and prepare to engage. The 1,200-meter sequence proved slightly more challenging due to increased wind effects, but again, all 5 shooters passed this portion. Sarah noticed that Rodriguez was shooting particularly well, his shots consistently finding the center ring of the target. She had to admit that his reputation was well earned. He was an exceptional marksman. 1,800 meters, came Hayes' voice. This is where the qualification starts to separate the good shooters from the great ones. Take your time, calculate carefully, and execute with precision. At this distance, the targets appeared much smaller through the scope, and the effects of wind and gravity became significantly more pronounced. Sarah took extra time with her calculations, referencing her data book for information about how this particular rifle performed at this range. Her first shot at 1,800 meters hit just outside the scoring ring. She made a quick adjustment for wind and fired her second shot, which struck closer to center. Her third shot was a solid hit in the scoring zone. She had passed this sequence, but not with the margin she would have preferred. Rodriguez and Williams both passed the 1,800-meter sequence with apparent ease. Morrison struggled slightly with his second shot, but recovered to pass. Jackson's performance was solid, but not spectacular. Final sequence, Hayes announced, her voice carrying across the range with absolute authority. 2,500 meters. This is the range that determines who has what it takes to be a military sniper. Environmental conditions remain the same, southwest wind at 8 to 12 miles per hour with gusts to 15. Remember, you need 2 hits out of 3 shots to pass. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as she adjusted her scope for the extreme range. At 2,500 meters, she would need to aim significantly high to account for bullet drop, and the wind calculation became critical. She spent several minutes studying the mirage patterns and watching the movement of grass and dust on the range to gauge wind conditions. Through her scope, the target looked impossibly small and distant. She could barely make out its outline, even with the high-powered optic. This was the moment of truth. Everything came down to her ability to execute under pressure. Rodriguez fired his first shot at the 2,500-meter target and scored a hit. The confidence in his posture was evident even from Sarah's position several lanes away. He had done this before, and he knew he could do it again. Williams fired next, also scoring a hit on his first attempt. Morrison and Jackson both missed their initial shots at the extreme range, but that was not unusual. Most shooters needed a couple of attempts to dial in the correct adjustments for 2,500 meters. Sarah took a deep breath and settled behind her rifle. She had practiced this shot countless times in her mind, visualizing every aspect of the process. Her finger found the trigger, and she began the slow, steady pressure that would send the bullet downrange. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and she immediately got back on the scope to spot her impact. Through the spotting scope, she could see that her bullet had struck low and left of the target. She made mental notes about the correction needed and prepared for her second shot. Her second attempt was closer, but still not a hit. She was running out of chances, and she could almost feel the smug satisfaction radiating from Rodriguez's direction. This was exactly what he had predicted. The rookie would fail when the pressure was highest. Sarah forced herself to remain calm as she prepared for her final shot at 2,500 meters. She made a small adjustment to her scope and double-checked her wind calculation. Everything had to be perfect this time. The shot broke clean and true, and through the scope, she saw the unmistakable puff of dust that indicated a hit on the target. She had done it barely, but she had passed the qualification. "All shooters cease fire," Hayes announced. "Range safety officers will verify targets and provide scores momentarily." As they waited for the official results, Rodriguez walked over to Sarah's position. His expression was grudgingly respectful, though still somewhat condescending. "Congratulations on passing," he said, extending his hand. "You made it through, which is more than most people can say. But I have to ask, what are you planning to do if you actually get assigned to a sniper team? This test is just the beginning. Real combat situations are completely different from controlled range conditions." Sarah shook his hand, maintaining eye contact. "I guess I'll do whatever needs to be done, just like anyone else, the same way you learned when you first started." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Fair enough, but don't expect special treatment when things get difficult. In this line of work, there's no room for weakness or hesitation." I wouldn't want special treatment, Sarah replied. I just want the opportunity to prove myself. Hayes approached with the official results. Congratulations to all 5 of you. You've successfully passed the sniper qualification and will be moving on to the Advanced Combat Training Program. Your assignments will be announced next week. As the others began packing their equipment, Hayes pulled Sarah aside. Good shooting today, Chen. You showed composure under pressure, which is exactly what we need to see. However, I want you to understand that the real challenges are just beginning. The advanced program will push you harder than anything you've experienced so far. Sarah nodded. I understand, Master Sergeant. I'm ready for whatever comes next. Hayes studied her for a moment longer. I believe you are, but remember, earning respect in this community isn't just about passing tests. It's about proving yourself when lives are on the line. That opportunity may come sooner than you think. As Sarah loaded her equipment into her vehicle, she reflected on the day's events. She had passed the qualification, which was her immediate goal. But Rodriguez's words echoed in her mind. The real test would come when she faced actual combat conditions, with real bullets flying in her direction and real lives depending on her accuracy. She had proven she could hit targets at long range under controlled conditions. Now she would need to prove she could do it when everything was chaos, when the stakes were life and death, and when failure meant more than just going home disappointed. The drive back to her quarters gave her time to think about what came next. The Advanced Combat Sniper Program would include training in fieldcraft, camouflage, observation techniques, and combat marksmanship under stress. She would be learning alongside some of the military's most elite shooters, and the standards would be even higher than what she had experienced today. But Sarah felt ready for the challenge. She had overcome doubts and skepticism before, and she would do it again. The 2,500-meter qualification was just the first step in proving that she belonged among the military's elite snipers. The real test would come when she had the opportunity to demonstrate her skills in actual combat conditions. As she pulled into the parking area near her quarters, Sarah made a mental note to continue practicing at extended ranges. The qualification had tested her abilities, but she suspected that the advanced program would require even greater precision and skill. She wanted to be prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. The evening air was cool as she unloaded her equipment, and Sarah allowed herself a moment to feel proud of what she had accomplished. It had been a long road to get to this point, filled with obstacles and doubters. But she had proven today that she could meet the same standards as any other sniper candidate. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove herself, and new chances to show that her presence in the elite sniper community was not just a token gesture, but a valuable addition to the team. She was ready for whatever came next. 3 weeks after passing the sniper qualification, Sarah found herself in the middle of nowhere, lying flat on her stomach in a patch of scrub brush that provided minimal concealment. The Advanced Combat Sniper Program had thrown her into the deep end immediately, and today's exercise was designed to test her ability to operate independently in hostile territory. The mission briefing had been straightforward but challenging. Infiltrate an area supposedly held by enemy forces, establish an observation post, and gather intelligence on enemy movements for 72 hours without being detected. The twist that made this exercise particularly demanding was that Rodriguez and his team were acting as the opposing force, actively hunting for her position. Sarah had been in place for 18 hours, and so far she had managed to avoid detection while documenting the movements of the opposing force. She had watched Rodriguez's team conduct searches of the area, coming within 50 meters of her position twice without spotting her. Each time they passed close by, her heart rate spiked, but she forced herself to remain perfectly still. Through her scope, she observed Rodriguez setting up what appeared to be a command post near an old abandoned farmhouse about 800 meters from her location. The exercise parameters allowed for simulated elimination of high-value targets, and Rodriguez certainly qualified as such. A successful shot would earn her significant points in the evaluation. But Sarah had bigger plans than just completing the exercise successfully. During her off-duty hours over the past 3 weeks, she had been secretly practicing at ranges far beyond the standard qualification distances. Using a military ballistics computer and data from various sniper manuals, she had calculated trajectories for shots out to 3,500 meters and beyond. She had even managed to convince a range officer to let her attempt a few shots at 3,000 meters during a weekend session. Her practice had paid off. She had successfully hit targets at 3,000 meters on 3 separate occasions, though she knew that controlled range conditions were vastly different from the field environment she now faced. Still, the knowledge that she could make such shots gave her confidence that a 2,500-meter shot in field conditions was well within her capabilities. The problem was finding a target at that range. Rodriguez and his team were operating within a much smaller area, mostly staying within 1,200 meters of her position. If she wanted to attempt a truly long-range shot that would demonstrate her capabilities, she would need to find a different target or wait for the right opportunity. That opportunity came on the second day of the exercise when Sarah spotted a vehicle approaching from the north. According to her map, the road the vehicle was traveling would pass through a valley approximately 2,800 meters from her current position. If she could time it correctly, she might be able to make a shot that would not only complete her exercise objectives, but also establish her credibility as a long-range marksman. Sarah spent the next hour calculating trajectories and studying wind conditions. The shot would be challenging not just because of the distance, but because the target would be moving. She would need to lead the vehicle by a considerable margin and account for the time it would take the bullet to travel nearly 3 kilometers. The mathematics were complex. At 2,800 meters, the bullet would take approximately 4 seconds to reach the target area. During that time, a vehicle traveling at 60 kilometers per hour would move about 67 meters. She would need to aim far ahead of the vehicle and time her shot perfectly. Sarah made careful adjustments to her scope and prepared her rifle for the extreme-range shot. She had loaded her ammunition with the heaviest bullets available, which would retain more energy and stability over the extended distance. Her ballistics calculations indicated she would need to aim approximately 30 feet above the target and account for significant wind drift. Through her scope, she watched the road where the vehicle would appear. Her radio crackled with updates from the exercise controllers, but she maintained radio silence as required by the mission parameters. She was completely on her own, with no spotters or support personnel to assist with the shot. The vehicle appeared right on schedule, moving at a steady pace along the distant road. Sarah tracked its movement through her scope, waiting for the perfect moment to fire. She had one chance to make this work. A miss would give away her position and likely result in her immediate capture by the opposing force. Sarah controlled her breathing and settled into the perfect shooting position. The crosshairs of her scope were aimed at what appeared to be empty road far ahead of the approaching vehicle. To anyone watching, it would look like she was aiming at nothing. But her calculations told her that if everything went perfectly, the bullet and the vehicle would arrive at the same point at the same time. The trigger broke clean and smooth, sending the bullet downrange on its long journey. Sarah immediately got back on the scope to observe the impact, though she knew it would take several seconds for the bullet to reach the target area. She watched the vehicle continue its approach to the point where she had aimed. 4 seconds later, she saw a puff of dust kick up from the road surface just as the vehicle passed through that exact spot. The timing had been perfect, but the bullet had struck the road rather than the vehicle itself. Still, the shot had been incredibly close considering the extreme distance and the fact that she was engaging a moving target. More importantly, the shot had been observed. Sarah could see through her scope that the vehicle had stopped, and the occupants were clearly trying to figure out where the shot had come from. Radio chatter on the exercise frequency indicated that the exercise controllers were trying to determine what had happened. Rodriguez's voice came over the radio, his tone sharp with concern. "Control, we heard a shot from the north sector, but there are no friendly forces in that area. Are we dealing with a safety issue?" The exercise controller responded after a brief pause. "All stations negative on safety issues. Continue with exercise parameters, investigating the source of the shot." Sarah smiled to herself as she packed her equipment to move to a new position. She had not scored a direct hit on the vehicle, but she had demonstrated that she could place shots accurately at ranges that most snipers considered impossible. More importantly, she had done it under field conditions with moving targets and without support personnel. Over the next several hours, Sarah continued her observation mission while gradually repositioning to avoid detection. She documented the movements of Rodriguez's team and noted their search patterns. They were clearly frustrated by their inability to locate her position, and she could see them expanding their search area. The third day of the exercise brought new challenges when weather conditions deteriorated. A storm front moved through the area, bringing heavy winds and intermittent rain. Visibility was reduced, and wind speeds increased to over 20 miles per hour. For most snipers, these conditions would make accurate shooting nearly impossible at extended ranges. But Sarah saw the storm as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. The poor visibility would help conceal her movements, and the difficult conditions would make the shot even more impressive if she could pull it off. She had been studying the weather reports and knew that the storm would pass through the area in waves, creating brief windows of better conditions. During one of these windows, Sarah spotted Rodriguez himself moving between positions about 1,800 meters from her location. He was clearly searching for her, moving systematically through areas where he thought she might be hiding. This was her chance to complete the exercise with a simulated elimination of the opposing force commander. But Sarah had a different idea. Instead of taking the straightforward shot at 1,800 meters, she decided to attempt something that would be talked about for years in the sniper community. She had spotted an observation tower about 3,200 meters to the south, where exercise observers were stationed to monitor the training area. A successful shot at that range would be completely unprecedented in the history of the training program. Sarah spent nearly an hour calculating the trajectory for a 3,200-meter shot in the current wind conditions. The mathematics were incredibly complex, requiring her to account for multiple variables including wind speed changes at different altitudes, the Coriolis effect from the Earth's rotation, and the significant bullet drop over such an extreme distance. Her ballistics computer indicated that she would need to aim approximately 40 feet above the target and account for a wind drift of nearly 20 feet. The margin for error was essentially zero. Even a small miscalculation would result in a complete miss. Sarah made the necessary adjustments to her scope and loaded a carefully selected round. She had been saving her best ammunition for exactly this type of shot, match-grade bullets that had been individually weighed and measured for consistency. Every aspect of her equipment and technique would need to be perfect. Through her scope, she could barely make out the observation tower in the distance. At 3,200 meters, even with high-powered optics, the target appeared as little more than a speck. She would be aiming at something she could barely see, trusting in mathematics and physics to guide her bullet to the target. Sarah controlled her breathing and entered the meditative state that all precision shooters cultivated. Her world narrowed to include only the crosshairs of her scope, the pressure of the trigger against her finger, and the calculations running through her mind. Everything else ceased to exist. The shot broke perfectly, with the rifle recoiling straight back without disturbing her sight picture. Sarah immediately tracked back to the target area, knowing it would take nearly 5 seconds for the bullet to complete its journey. She held her breath as she watched through the scope, waiting to see if her calculations had been correct. 5 seconds later, she saw a small puff of dust near the base of the observation tower. The shot had been close, very close, but not quite on target. Still, the fact that she had put a bullet within a few feet of a target at 3,200 meters was an achievement that few snipers in the world could claim. The radio immediately came alive with chatter from the observation tower. The personnel there had clearly heard the bullet impact nearby and were trying to figure out where it had come from. The exercise controllers were scrambling to understand what had happened. All stations, we have reports of a shot impacting near the observation tower. Can any unit account for this shot? Came the voice of the chief exercise controller. Rodriguez's voice responded, confusion clear in his tone. Control, that's impossible. The observation tower is over 3 kilometers from the exercise area. No one in the exercise has the capability to shoot that distance. Sarah decided it was time to reveal her position and conclude the exercise. She had demonstrated capabilities far beyond what anyone expected, and continuing to hide would serve no purpose. She keyed her radio and spoke for the first time in 3 days. Control, this is Chen. I can account for the shot near the observation tower, requesting permission to terminate exercise and return to base. The silence on the radio lasted nearly 10 seconds before the exercise controller responded. Chen, confirm your current position for recovery. Sarah provided her coordinates, and within an hour, a vehicle arrived to pick her up. As she loaded her equipment, she could see Rodriguez and his team approaching from multiple directions. They had been searching for her for 3 days without success, and now they were finally getting to see where she had been hiding. Rodriguez walked up to her position and looked around at her improvised hide site. His expression was a mixture of professional respect and personal incredulity. "How long have you been in this position?" he asked. "About 36 hours, Sarah replied, packing the last of her equipment. "I moved twice during the exercise to avoid detection." Williams examined the area where Sarah had been concealed, noting the careful camouflage work and the minimal disturbance to the surrounding vegetation. "This is excellent fieldcraft," he admitted. "We walked within 50 meters of this position twice and never spotted you." Morrison was studying Sarah's firing position, trying to understand the angles and distances involved. "The shot at the observation tower, how far was that?" Sarah consulted her range finder. 3,240 meters, according to my calculations." The four men exchanged glances, and Jackson shook his head in disbelief. "That's impossible. Nobody makes shots at that distance in field conditions." "The shot missed," Sarah said honestly, "but it was close enough to verify the range calculation was correct." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, processing the implications of what Sarah had attempted. "Even if you missed, the fact that you could put a shot in the general area at that range is impressive. Most snipers wouldn't even attempt a shot beyond 2,500 meters in the field." The ride back to base was quiet, with each member of Rodriguez's team lost in thought. Sarah had not only successfully completed the exercise, but had demonstrated capabilities that challenged their assumptions about her skill level. The woman they had dismissed as an inexperienced rookie had just outperformed them in every aspect of the training scenario. Back at the training facility, word of Sarah's performance spread quickly through the sniper community. The instructors were particularly interested in her long-range shooting attempts, and several senior personnel requested detailed reports about her techniques and calculations. Master Sergeant Hayes called Sarah into her office the following morning for a debriefing. "I've reviewed the reports from your exercise, Chen. Your performance exceeded expectations in multiple areas. However, I'm particularly interested in your long-range shooting attempts. Walk me through your thinking on those shots." Sarah spent the next hour explaining her calculations, practice sessions, and the techniques she had developed for extreme-range shooting. Hayes listened carefully, occasionally asking technical questions about ballistics and environmental factors. "Your approach is methodical and scientifically sound," Hayes concluded. "But I have to ask, where did you learn advanced ballistics calculation techniques? That's not material we cover until much later in the program." Sarah explained her independent study efforts and the additional practice sessions she had arranged. Hayes nodded approvingly, clearly impressed by the initiative and dedication required for such self-directed learning. "I'm recommending you for accelerated placement in the advanced program," Hayes said. "Your performance indicates you're ready for challenges beyond the standard curriculum. However, I want you to understand that with advanced placement comes higher expectations and greater scrutiny." Sarah left the meeting feeling both proud and apprehensive. She had proven herself capable of extraordinary performance, but she knew that success would bring new challenges and higher stakes. Rodriguez and his team had already begun treating her with more respect, but she suspected that future evaluations would be designed to push her even harder. That afternoon, Sarah received notification of her next assignment. She would be joining a specialized unit that conducted reconnaissance and counter-sniper operations in high-threat environments. It was exactly the type of assignment she had hoped for, but it also meant that her training period was over. From now on, her performance would be measured not in training scores, but in mission success and operational effectiveness. As she prepared for the transition to operational status, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since her qualification test just a few weeks earlier. She had gone from being the unproven rookie that everyone doubted to being a sniper whose capabilities were recognized and respected by her peers. But she also understood that respect in the sniper community had to be continually earned through consistent performance under increasingly difficult conditions. The long-range shots she had made during the exercise were impressive, but they were just the beginning of what would be required in actual combat operations. The real test would come when she faced live enemies who were shooting back, when the stakes were life and death rather than training scores, and when failure meant more than just disappointing her instructors. Sarah felt ready for those challenges, but she knew that confidence and preparation were no guarantee of success in the unpredictable world of military operations. 6 months after completing her training, Sarah found herself crouched in the ruins of a bombed-out building in a war-torn city halfway around the world. The mission had started as a routine reconnaissance operation, but intelligence reports now indicated that a high-value enemy commander would be moving through the area within the next few hours. Sarah's team had been tasked with eliminating this target before he could escape to a different sector. The team consisted of Sarah as the primary sniper, Rodriguez as her spotter and backup shooter, and Williams providing security and communications. Despite their initial skepticism about working with her, both men had requested to serve on Sarah's team after reviewing reports of her training performance. Professional respect had replaced their earlier doubts, though Sarah knew she still had to prove herself in actual combat conditions. Rodriguez was positioned beside her, studying the target area through a high-powered spotting scope. The enemy commander was expected to appear at a building approximately 1,400 meters away, a challenging but manageable shot under normal circumstances. However, environmental conditions were far from normal. The city had been under siege for months, and smoke from burning buildings created unpredictable wind patterns that could affect bullet trajectory. Additionally, the constant threat of enemy snipers meant that Sarah and her team could not remain in any position for extended periods without risking detection and counterattack. "Movement in the target building," Rodriguez reported quietly, his voice barely audible even though Sarah was lying right next to him. "Multiple personnel, but I can't identify the primary target yet." Sarah adjusted her scope and studied the distant building. Through the haze and smoke, she could make out figures moving between windows, but none matched the description of their target. Intelligence reports described the enemy commander as a tall man with distinctive scarring on the left side of his face, details that would be difficult to confirm at 1,400 meters, even under perfect conditions. Williams' voice came through their earpieces from his security position 30 meters behind them. "Patrol approaching from the east. 3 vehicles, armed personnel. We may need to relocate soon." Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with imminent danger. This was what all her training had prepared her for, making critical shots under pressure, while enemy forces actively hunted for her position. The controlled environment of the training range seemed like a distant memory compared to the chaos and uncertainty of actual combat. "Target identified," Rodriguez said suddenly, his voice tight with concentration. "Tall individual with visible scarring, 3rd floor, center window. Range confirmed at 1,420 meters." Sarah shifted her rifle to track the target, finding the figure Rodriguez had spotted. Even through her scope, details were difficult to make out, but the height and general description matched their intelligence. This was likely their target, but she would have only seconds to confirm and take the shot before the figure disappeared again. The target moved away from the window, and Sarah held her position, waiting for another opportunity. Military snipers learned early in their training that patience was often more important than shooting skill. Rushing a shot or taking marginal opportunities led to misses and compromised positions. "Vehicles are getting closer," Williams reported. "Recommend we take the shot and relocate immediately." Sarah understood the pressure they were under, but she also knew that a hasty shot at 1,400 meters was likely to miss. She had trained extensively for exactly this type of situation, making accurate shots under time pressure while enemy forces closed in on her position. The target reappeared at a different window, this time remaining stationary for several seconds as he appeared to be giving instructions to someone inside the building. Sarah had a clear view of his profile and could confirm the facial scarring described in their intelligence briefing. This was definitely their target. Sarah settled into her shooting position and began the process of calculating her shot. Wind conditions were variable due to the smoke and heat from fires throughout the city. She could see dust and debris being blown around at different levels, indicating that wind speed and direction were changing with altitude. Rodriguez was providing continuous updates on wind conditions and target movement. "Wind is 8 to 10 from the southwest at our level, but I'm seeing different patterns higher up. Target is stationary, clear shot available." Sarah made final adjustments to her scope and controlled her breathing. The mathematical calculations ran through her mind automatically. Bullet drop at 1,420 meters would be approximately 32 feet, requiring significant elevation adjustment. Wind drift would push the bullet approximately 18 inches to the right, requiring her to aim slightly left of the target. The crosshairs settled on the target center mass, with adjustments for all environmental factors. Sarah's finger found the trigger, and she began the slow, steady pressure that would send the bullet downrange. The rifle recoiled sharply, and she immediately got back on the scope to observe the impact. Through her scope, Sarah saw the target suddenly drop from view. Rodriguez was watching through the spotting scope, trying to confirm whether the shot had been successful or if the target had simply moved to cover. "Hit confirmed," Rodriguez said after several tense seconds. "Target is down, no movement visible." Williams' voice cut through their celebration. "Vehicles are 2 minutes out. We need to move now." Sarah and Rodriguez quickly packed their equipment and followed Williams through the ruins of the building to their extraction point. The successful elimination of the enemy commander would significantly disrupt enemy operations in this sector, but their immediate priority was escaping before enemy forces could locate and surround their position. As they moved through the rubble-strewn streets, Sarah reflected on the shot she had just made. It had been technically challenging due to the environmental conditions, but the range was well within her capabilities. She found herself wondering if she would have opportunities to demonstrate the extreme long-range skills she had developed during training. That opportunity came 3 weeks later during a mission that would become legendary in sniper communities around the world. Intelligence reports indicated that a key enemy leader was planning to inspect defensive positions in a mountain valley approximately 15 kilometers from Sarah's current position. The leader's route would take him through an area that offered a potential shooting position at an unprecedented range. Sarah's team had been tasked with establishing an observation post to monitor enemy movements in the valley. The mission parameters did not specifically call for engagement at extreme range, but if an opportunity presented itself to eliminate high-value targets, they were authorized to take action. The observation post was located on a mountain ridge that provided an excellent view of the entire valley below. Sarah spent 2 days studying the terrain and calculating potential shot opportunities at various ranges. Most of the enemy activity was occurring at distances between 2,000 and 3,000 meters from her position. On the 3rd day, radio intercepts confirmed that the enemy leader would be conducting his inspection tour that afternoon. Sarah prepared her equipment for the possibility of an extremely long-range shot, loading her best ammunition and making precise adjustments to her scope. Rodriguez was incredulous when Sarah explained her plan. "You're talking about a shot at nearly 5,000 meters. That's beyond the effective range of any sniper rifle in the world." Sarah had done her calculations carefully. The .338 Lapua Magnum can deliver lethal energy at that range under the right conditions. The bullet will take over 7 seconds to reach the target, and the trajectory will be extremely high, but it's mathematically possible. Williams studied Sarah's ballistics calculations and weather data. Even if the ballistics work out, how are you going to confirm the target at that distance? You won't be able to see details clearly enough to make a positive identification. Sarah had anticipated this challenge. Intelligence reports describe the target vehicle and the specific route they'll be taking. If a vehicle matching that description appears on schedule at the predicted location, it's almost certainly our target. The afternoon brought perfect weather conditions, clear skies, minimal wind, and excellent visibility. Through her scope, Sarah could see the road where the enemy convoy was expected to appear. At nearly 5,000 meters, even vehicles would appear as tiny specks moving along what looked like a thin line across the valley floor. Rodriguez was using a range finder to confirm distances to various points along the road. "I'm getting readings between 4,800 and 4,900 meters, depending on exactly where on the road we're measuring." Sarah selected a point where the road crossed a small bridge as her aiming point. This location offered the best combination of clear sight lines and predictable target movement. According to her calculations, she would need to aim approximately 60 feet above the target to account for bullet drop, and lead the moving vehicle by nearly 200 meters to account for travel time. The ballistics were so extreme that Sarah had to make adjustments beyond the normal range of her scope. She used a technique called Kentucky windage. making calculated holdover adjustments that went far beyond her scope's mechanical adjustments. To anyone watching, it would appear that she was aiming at empty sky high above and far ahead of the actual target. At 15:30 hours, the expected convoy appeared on the distant road, moving toward the bridge where Sarah had calculated her shot. Through binoculars, Rodriguez could confirm that the lead vehicle matched the description provided by intelligence sources. "Target vehicle confirmed," Rodriguez reported. "Speed appears consistent with our calculations. Recommend taking the shot when the vehicle approaches the bridge." Sarah tracked the tiny speck of the vehicle through her scope, waiting for it to reach the optimal position. Her crosshairs were aimed at what appeared to be empty road surface far ahead of where the vehicle would actually be when she fired. The shot required perfect timing, fire too early or too late, and the bullet would miss by hundreds of meters. The moment arrived, and Sarah fired. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, sending the bullet on its 7-second journey across nearly 5 kilometers of mountain terrain. Sarah immediately got back on the scope, though she knew it would be several seconds before the bullet reached the target area. Through her scope, Sarah watched the tiny dot of the vehicle continue its approach to the bridge. 7 seconds felt like an eternity as she waited to see if her calculations had been correct. The mathematical precision required for such a shot left no margin for error. Suddenly, she saw a flash and a puff of smoke from the area where the vehicle should have been. The convoy stopped immediately, with vehicles scattering in different directions as personnel realized they were under attack. Through the spotting scope, Rodriguez was trying to confirm what had happened. "I think you hit something," Rodriguez said, his voice filled with disbelief. "The lead vehicle stopped suddenly, and there's definitely some kind of disruption in the convoy." Williams was monitoring radio traffic from the enemy forces. "They're reporting that their lead vehicle has been hit by sniper fire, but they can't locate the source. They're requesting immediate medical evacuation." The confirmation came an hour later through intercepted communications. The enemy leader had been killed by a single sniper bullet that struck his vehicle at a range that enemy forces considered impossible. The psychological impact of the shot was as significant as the tactical victory. Enemy personnel were now afraid to move in any area where they might be visible from long range. Word of Sarah's 4,900-meter shot spread quickly through military intelligence networks. Senior commanders requested detailed reports about the shooting techniques and equipment used. Ballistics experts were brought in to verify that such a shot was even possible under the conditions described. Rodriguez and Williams found themselves answering endless questions about Sarah's capabilities and methods. Their initial skepticism about her abilities had been completely replaced by professional awe. They had witnessed shooting performance that redefined what was considered possible in military sniping. "I've been a sniper for 8 years, Rodriguez told the debriefing officers, "and I would have said that shot was impossible if I hadn't seen it myself. The mathematical precision required is beyond anything I've ever encountered." Sarah's achievement went far beyond the technical aspects of long-range shooting. She had proven that innovative thinking, rigorous preparation, and precise execution could overcome challenges that others considered insurmountable. The shot became a case study taught in advanced sniper schools and changed tactical doctrine regarding the effective range of sniper operations. But for Sarah, the shot represented something even more significant. She had moved beyond proving herself to her immediate colleagues and had demonstrated capabilities that earned recognition from the highest levels of military leadership. The rookie who had struggled to pass her initial qualification had become one of the most capable snipers in military history. The mission concluded with Sarah's team successfully extracted without enemy contact. Their observation post had provided valuable intelligence about enemy movements, and the elimination of the key leader had disrupted enemy operations throughout the region. But it was the nearly 5,000-meter shot that would be remembered and discussed for years to come. As they flew back to their base, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the skepticism she faced during qualification testing to the respect she had earned through consistent performance under pressure, every challenge had contributed to her development as both a sniper and a leader. Rodriguez broke the contemplative silence in the helicopter. "I owe you an apology, Chen. When we first met, I didn't think you belonged in this community. I was wrong, and I'm glad to admit it." Williams nodded in agreement. That shot today will be talked about in sniper schools for decades. You've changed what people think is possible. Sarah appreciated their words, but she also understood that exceptional performance brought new responsibilities. She had proven her capabilities beyond any doubt, but she also knew that future missions would bring new challenges that would test different aspects of her skills and judgment. The helicopter touched down at their base as the sun was setting. Sarah gathered her equipment and prepared for the extensive debriefing sessions that would follow. Military officials would want to understand every detail of the shot so they could incorporate the lessons learned into training programs and tactical doctrine. But beyond the technical aspects, Sarah knew that her performance had implications for other women seeking to serve in similar roles. She had proven that gender was irrelevant when it came to the mental discipline, technical knowledge, and physical skills required for elite military performance. As she walked across the base toward the debriefing center, Sarah thought about the arrogant sniper squad that had doubted her abilities during qualification testing. Their skepticism had motivated her to push beyond standard requirements and develop capabilities that exceeded anything they had imagined possible. In a way, their doubt had been the catalyst for her greatest achievement. The news of Sarah's record-breaking 4,900-meter shot had reached the highest levels of military command, creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond her immediate unit. Within days of the mission report reaching headquarters, Sarah found herself summoned to brief senior officers about her techniques and methodologies. What she didn't expect was the reaction from the broader sniper community, particularly from those who had initially doubted her capabilities. Master Sergeant Hayes called Sarah into her office upon her return to the training facility. The expression on Hayes' face was one of professional pride mixed with something that looked almost like disbelief. "Chen, I've been training snipers for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like the reports I'm reading about your recent mission. Walk me through exactly what happened." Sarah spent the next 2 hours providing a detailed account of the shot, including her calculations, environmental considerations, and the technical modifications she had made to achieve the extreme range capability. Hayes listened intently, occasionally asking technical questions that demonstrated her deep understanding of ballistics and marksmanship principles. "Your methodology is sound," Hayes concluded, "but the execution required a level of precision that most snipers would consider impossible. You've effectively extended the theoretical maximum range for military snipers by nearly 1,000 meters." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on Hayes' office door. Rodriguez entered, followed by Williams, Morrison, and Jackson, the same team that had been so skeptical during Sarah's qualification testing. Their expressions were markedly different from the condescending looks they had worn months earlier. Rodriguez spoke first, his tone respectful and serious. "Master Sergeant, we requested permission to speak with Chen about her recent performance. We wanted to offer our congratulations and ask some technical questions." Hayes nodded and gestured for them to enter. "Chen was just briefing me on the details of her long-range engagement. I'm sure she can share some insights that would benefit all of you." Morrison stepped forward, his earlier arrogance completely replaced by genuine curiosity. "The reports mention a shot at nearly 5,000 meters. I have to ask, how did you even begin to calculate ballistics for that distance? That's beyond anything covered in our training programs." Sarah found herself in the unusual position of teaching advanced techniques to snipers who had initially dismissed her as unqualified. She explained her independent research into extreme-range ballistics, the additional practice sessions she had conducted, and the mathematical models she had developed to calculate trajectories beyond standard tables. "The key is understanding that at extreme ranges, you have to account for factors that don't matter at normal shooting distances," Sarah explained. "The Coriolis effect becomes significant. Air density variations at different altitudes affect bullet flight, and even the curvature of the Earth starts to influence trajectory calculations." Jackson shook his head in amazement. "Where did you learn about those factors? That's graduate-level physics applied to ballistics." Sarah explained her background in mathematics and physics, subjects she had studied before joining the military. Her academic foundation had provided the theoretical knowledge needed to understand extreme ballistics, while her military training had given her the practical skills to apply that knowledge in combat situations. Williams was studying the ballistics charts that Sarah had prepared for the mission. Even with perfect calculations, the shot still required incredible precision in execution. The margin for error at that distance would be essentially zero. "That's why I spent so much time practicing at extended ranges," Sarah replied. "I knew that if an opportunity for an extreme-range shot ever presented itself, I would need muscle memory and instinctive understanding of my equipment. You can't calculate your way through a shot like that. At some point, it becomes about feel and experience." Rodriguez nodded slowly, clearly impressed by Sarah's approach. "When we first met, I thought your lack of combat experience was a liability. I didn't realize that your academic background would actually be an advantage for this type of shooting." The discussion continued for another hour, with Sarah sharing insights about equipment modifications, ammunition selection, and practice techniques for extreme-range shooting. The four men who had once questioned her presence in the sniper community were now taking detailed notes and asking for recommendations about improving their own long-range capabilities. Hayes observed the exchange with satisfaction. "This is exactly the kind of knowledge transfer that makes our sniper community stronger. Chen, I want you to consider developing a formal training program for extreme-range shooting. Your techniques could benefit snipers across all branches of the military." The meeting was interrupted by the arrival of Colonel James Mitchell, the base commander. His presence indicated that Sarah's achievement had attracted attention from the highest levels of command. All personnel in the room immediately stood and came to attention. "At ease," Colonel Mitchell said, his eyes focusing on Sarah. "Sergeant Chen, I've been reading some remarkable reports about your recent mission performance. I wanted to meet with you personally to discuss the implications of what you've accomplished." Colonel Mitchell had served as a sniper himself early in his career and understood the technical significance of Sarah's achievement. He explained that her shot had not only been a tactical success, but had also provided valuable intelligence about enemy vulnerabilities and had significantly impacted enemy morale in the region. "More importantly," the colonel continued, "your performance has demonstrated capabilities that could change how we approach certain types of missions. I'm authorizing the development of a specialized program to train other snipers in extreme-range techniques based on your methods." Sarah felt a mixture of pride and responsibility. Her individual achievement was being transformed into a broader initiative that could benefit countless other military personnel. The girl who had struggled to prove herself worthy of basic sniper training was now being asked to develop advanced curriculum for elite marksmen. The colonel turned to Rodriguez and his team. "I understand you gentlemen worked with Sergeant Chen during her training period. I'd like your assessment of her overall capabilities and potential for leadership roles." Rodriguez's response was immediate and unequivocal. "Sir, Sergeant Chen is the most capable sniper I've ever worked with. Her technical knowledge, practical skills, and performance under pressure are exceptional. I would recommend her for any advanced assignment or leadership position." Williams, Morrison, and Jackson echoed Rodriguez's assessment, each adding their own observations about Sarah's professionalism, innovation, and dedication. Their endorsement was particularly meaningful given their initial skepticism about her abilities. Colonel Mitchell nodded approvingly. "Based on these recommendations and her demonstrated performance, I'm promoting Sergeant Chen to Staff Sergeant and assigning her to lead the new extreme-range sniper program. She'll be responsible for developing training protocols, selecting equipment, and instructing other personnel in advanced techniques." The promotion and assignment represented a significant milestone in Sarah's career. In less than a year, she had gone from being an unproven trainee to leading an innovative program that could influence military tactics for years to come. The recognition was gratifying, but Sarah also understood the immense responsibility that came with it. After the formal meeting concluded, Rodriguez approached Sarah privately. "I owe you more than just congratulations," he said. "When you first arrived here, I let my assumptions about your background and experience cloud my judgment. I was wrong, and I want you to know that your performance has taught me to evaluate people based on their capabilities rather than my preconceptions." Sarah appreciated his honesty and directness. "Your skepticism actually helped motivate me to push beyond minimum standards. Sometimes doubt from others can be a powerful driving force for improvement." Over the following weeks, Sarah began developing the curriculum for the extreme-range sniper program. She worked with ballistics experts, equipment manufacturers, and experienced instructors to create a comprehensive training system that would teach other snipers the skills needed for shots beyond 3,000 meters. The program attracted attention from allied military forces around the world. Several international partners requested permission to send their own snipers for training in Sarah's techniques. The methods she had developed through independent study and practical application were becoming the foundation for a new approach to military marksmanship. Sarah found herself traveling to various training facilities to demonstrate her techniques and train instructors who would implement the program at their own bases. Each presentation required her to explain not just the technical aspects of extreme-range shooting, but also the mental preparation and disciplined practice required to achieve consistent accuracy at such distances. During one of these training sessions, Sarah encountered a group of experienced snipers who reminded her of Rodriguez and his team during her early training days. They were skilled professionals who had been successful using conventional techniques and were skeptical about the need for extreme-range capabilities. "With respect, Staff Sergeant," one of the instructors said, "most tactical situations don't require shots beyond 1,500 meters. Why should we invest training time in techniques that may never be used in actual combat?" Sarah understood their perspective and had prepared for this type of question. "You're right that most engagements occur at shorter ranges," she acknowledged. "But extreme-range capability provides several advantages beyond just the ability to make distant shots." She explained how extreme-range training improved overall shooting skills by requiring greater precision and discipline. The mathematical understanding needed for long-range ballistics made snipers more effective at all distances. Additionally, the psychological impact of knowing that enemy forces could be engaged from previously safe distances had significant tactical value. "More importantly," Sarah continued, "developing these capabilities ensures that we're prepared for unique situations where extreme-range shots might be the only viable option. The shot I made at 4,900 meters eliminated a high-value target who would have been impossible to reach using conventional tactics." The training session proved successful, with the skeptical instructors becoming enthusiastic supporters of the program by the end of the week. Sarah's patient explanation of the techniques, combined with practical demonstrations of their effectiveness, won over even the most doubtful participants. 3 months after beginning the Extreme Range program, Sarah received her first class of students. 20 experienced snipers from various units had been selected to participate in the intensive 4-week course. The students included several who had been shooting professionally for over a decade and were initially skeptical about learning from someone they perceived as relatively inexperienced. Sarah's approach to instruction emphasized understanding over memorization. Rather than simply teaching students to follow ballistic tables, she ensured they understood the physical principles underlying long-range shooting. This knowledge allowed them to adapt to unusual conditions and solve problems they had never encountered before. The training culminated in a practical exercise where students attempted shots at ranges between 3,000 and 4,000 meters. Most of the participants successfully hit targets at distances they had previously considered impossible. The achievement validated Sarah's teaching methods and demonstrated the effectiveness of her program. Rodriguez, who had volunteered to serve as an instructor in the program, observed the final exercise with obvious pride. "A year ago, I didn't think you belonged in this community," he told Sarah as they watched students celebrate their successful shots. "Now I realize you're not just part of the community, you're leading it in new directions." The success of the Extreme Range program led to additional recognition for Sarah's contributions to military effectiveness. She received commendations from senior officers and was invited to present her techniques at professional conferences and symposiums. The shy recruit who had struggled to prove herself had become a recognized expert whose innovations were studied by military professionals worldwide. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from Hayes, her original instructor, who had watched Sarah's entire journey from uncertain beginner to accomplished leader. "You've accomplished something remarkable, Chen," Hayes told her during a quiet moment after a particularly successful training session. "You've proven that innovation and dedication can overcome any obstacle, including the skepticism of people who should have known better." Sarah reflected on how much had changed since her early days of training. The doubts and challenges that had seemed overwhelming at the time had actually served to strengthen her resolve and push her toward greater achievements. The arrogant sniper squad that had frozen in disbelief at her capabilities had become some of her strongest supporters and advocates. As she prepared for the next phase of her career, Sarah understood that her greatest contribution was not just the technical innovations she had developed, but the example she had set for others who might face similar doubts and challenges. She had proven that determination, coupled with rigorous preparation and continuous learning, could overcome any preconceived limitations. 2 years after her record-breaking shot, Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen found herself standing before an international audience of military professionals at the World Sniper Symposium in Fort Benning, Georgia. The auditorium was filled with elite marksmen from dozens of countries, many of whom had traveled thousands of miles specifically to hear her speak about extreme-range shooting techniques. The transformation from doubted rookie to internationally recognized expert was complete, but Sarah's greatest challenge still lay ahead. The symposium had attracted media attention that extended far beyond military circles. Sarah's story had captured public imagination as an example of how determination and innovation could overcome institutional skepticism. But with that attention came scrutiny from those who questioned whether her achievements were genuine or had been exaggerated for propaganda purposes. Among the audience members were several snipers who had openly challenged the validity of Sarah's 4,900-meter shot. They argued that such distances were beyond the practical limits of current rifle technology, and that the reported success was either a lucky accident or a fabrication designed to enhance military recruiting efforts. The most vocal skeptic was Sergeant Major Viktor Petrov, a Russian sniper with over 300 confirmed kills and a reputation as one of the most skilled marksmen in the world. Petrov had publicly stated that Sarah's claimed shot was mathematically impossible under combat conditions, and had demanded a live demonstration to prove the techniques were genuine. Sarah had agreed to the demonstration, knowing that her credibility and the future of her training program depended on successfully proving her capabilities under international scrutiny. The test would be conducted at a range specifically prepared for extreme-distance shooting, with observers from multiple countries monitoring every aspect of the attempt. Rodriguez, now a master sergeant and co-director of the Extreme Range program, briefed Sarah on the conditions for the demonstration. The range extends to 5,200 meters, with wind monitoring stations every 500 meters. Target verification will be conducted by neutral observers from 3 different countries. Whether conditions are optimal, minimal wind, clear visibility, stable atmospheric pressure. Sarah studied the ballistic data for the demonstration range. The target would be placed at exactly 5,000 meters, slightly longer than her record shot, but within the theoretical capabilities of her equipment and techniques. She would have 3 attempts to achieve a verifiable hit, with international observers confirming the results. The pressure was immense. Failure would not only damage her personal reputation, but could also undermine the credibility of the training program she had developed. Hundreds of military personnel had invested time and resources in learning her techniques, and their careers could be affected by questions about the validity of the methods they had been taught. Williams, Morrison, and Jackson had all requested permission to serve as part of Sarah's support team for the demonstration. Their presence was both encouraging and meaningful. The same men who had initially doubted her abilities were now willing to stake their own reputations on her success. "Just treat it like any other shot," Williams advised during the final preparation session. "You've made this distance before under combat conditions. Range conditions are actually easier than what you faced in the field." Sarah appreciated the support, but she also understood the unique pressures of the demonstration. In combat, she had been focused solely on completing the mission. Now, she was performing for an audience that included people actively hopping to see her fail. The psychological dynamic was completely different from anything she had experienced before. The morning of the demonstration brought perfect weather conditions. Clear skies, minimal wind, and excellent visibility created ideal circumstances for extreme-range shooting. Sarah could not blame environmental factors if she failed to perform. Everything would depend on her skill and preparation. Sergeant Major Petrov approached Sarah as she prepared her equipment. His expression was skeptical but professional. "I hope you understand that my questions about your previous shot are not personal," he said. "I have simply seen too many exaggerated claims in this profession to accept extraordinary reports without verification." Sarah nodded, understanding his perspective. I appreciate your professionalism, Sergeant Major. I hope today's demonstration will answer your questions definitively. Petrov studied Sarah's rifle and equipment setup with obvious expertise. Your ballistic calculations appear sound, and your equipment is certainly capable of extreme-range performance. However, there is a significant difference between theoretical capability and practical execution under pressure. The demonstration began with Sarah making practice shots at shorter distances to verify her equipment and confirm atmospheric conditions. Her shots at 1,500, 2,500, and 3,500 meters were all successful, demonstrating consistent accuracy as the range increased. Colonel Mitchell, now serving as the senior observer for the demonstration, announced the parameters for the extreme-range attempt. Staff Sergeant Chen will now attempt 3 shots at a target placed at exactly 5,000 meters. International observers have verified the range measurement and will confirm any impacts. Weather conditions have been documented and will remain constant throughout the shooting sequence. Sarah approached the firing line with her equipment, aware that hundreds of people were watching her every move. Television cameras captured the scene for broadcast to military installations around the world. The shy recruit who had once trembled during qualification testing was now the center of international attention. Rodriguez took his position as spotter, providing wind readings and target information. Range confirmed at 5,000 meters. Wind is 3 to 5 miles per hour from the west. Target is clearly visible. You have a perfect shooting window. Sarah settled behind her rifle and began her pre-shot routine. The mathematical calculations ran through her mind automatically. Bullet drop at 5,000 meters would require an elevation adjustment of over 60 feet. Wind drift would be minimal under current conditions, but she still needed to account for the Coriolis effect and atmospheric variations. Through her scope, the target appeared as a tiny speck in the distance. At 5,000 meters, even with high-powered optics, she was aiming at something barely visible. The shot would require perfect execution of techniques she had spent years developing and refining. Sarah's first shot broke cleanly, with the rifle recoiling straight back without disturbing her sight picture. She immediately got back on the scope to observe the impact, though she knew the bullet would take over 7 seconds to reach the target. The silence from the observation area was absolute as everyone waited to see the result. 7 seconds later, observers at the target reported a miss, with the bullet impacting approximately 15 feet low and 10 feet left of the target. The near miss confirmed that Sarah's ballistics calculations were extremely close, but slight environmental variations had affected the bullet's trajectory. Sarah made mental adjustments for her second shot, correcting for the observed impact point. The pressure was increasing. She had 2 more chances to prove her capabilities to an international audience that included many skeptics. Her second shot also missed, this time by a smaller margin. The bullet struck approximately 8 feet low and 5 feet right of the target. Sarah was getting closer with each attempt, but the margin for error at 5,000 meters was so small that even minor variations could result in a miss. The observation area was silent as Sarah prepared for her final attempt. This shot would determine not only her personal credibility, but also the future of extreme-range sniper training programs. Failure would validate the critics who claimed such distances were beyond practical military capability. Rodriguez provided continuous updates on wind conditions, but Sarah could see that atmospheric conditions remained stable. Her calculations had been correct. She simply needed perfect execution on this final attempt. Sarah controlled her breathing and entered the meditative state that all precision shooters cultivated. The noise of the crowd faded away, and her world narrowed to include only the crosshairs of her scope and the pressure of the trigger against her finger. Years of training and practice had prepared her for exactly this moment. The shot broke with perfect surprise, catching Sarah at the natural pause in her respiratory cycle. The rifle recoiled smoothly, and she immediately tracked back to the target area to observe the impact. The 7-second flight time felt eternal as she waited to see if her final attempt had been successful. The silence was broken by a cheer from the observers at the target. Through radio communication, they confirmed that Sarah's third shot had struck the center of the target, achieving a clean hit at exactly 5,000 meters. The demonstration had been successful beyond any possible doubt. The observation area erupted in applause as military professionals from around the world acknowledged Sarah's achievement. Even the skeptics were forced to admit that they had witnessed shooting performance that redefined the possibilities for military marksmanship. Sergeant Major Petrov was among the first to congratulate Sarah after the successful shot. "I owe you an apology, Staff Sergeant. Your capabilities are genuine, and your techniques represent a significant advancement in sniper effectiveness. I would be honored to learn from your methods." Colonel Mitchell presented Sarah with a formal commendation recognizing her contributions to military marksmanship and her successful demonstration of extreme-range capabilities. "You have not only proven your personal abilities," he said, "but you have also validated training methods that will benefit military forces around the world." The success of the demonstration led to immediate requests from allied nations for access to Sarah's training program. Military leaders recognized that extreme-range sniper capabilities could provide significant tactical advantages in future conflicts, and they wanted their personnel trained in the most advanced techniques available. Sarah found herself appointed to an international committee responsible for developing standardized training protocols for extreme-range shooting. Her methods would be adapted for use by military forces from dozens of countries, ensuring that the innovations she had developed would have global impact. Rodriguez, who had played a crucial role in Sarah's development from skeptical colleague to supportive partner, was assigned as deputy director of the international program. "It's remarkable to think that 3 years ago, we were questioning whether you belonged in the sniper community," he reflected during a quiet moment after the demonstration. "Now you're leading efforts to advance the entire profession." Williams, Morrison, and Jackson had all applied for positions in the expanded training program, wanting to be part of the revolutionary changes that Sarah had initiated. Their transformation from doubters to enthusiastic supporters represented the broader acceptance that Sarah had achieved within the military community. Master Sergeant Hayes, now promoted to Sergeant Major and serving as senior advisor to the program, observed Sarah's continued development with obvious pride. "You've exceeded every expectation I had when you first entered sniper training," she told Sarah. "But more importantly, you've proven that innovation and determination can overcome any obstacle, including the skepticism of people who should have known better." The media coverage of Sarah's demonstration extended her influence beyond military circles. Her story became an inspiration for anyone facing institutional doubt or professional challenges. Schools began inviting her to speak about perseverance and the importance of continuous learning and improvement. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from the new students entering Sarah's training program. Young women and men from around the world sought to learn from her example, inspired by her journey from doubted recruit to internationally recognized expert. They represented the future of military marksmanship, and Sarah took her responsibility for their development very seriously. As Sarah stood before her latest class of international students, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The arrogant sniper squad that had once frozen in disbelief at her capabilities had become the foundation of a global training network. The techniques she had developed through individual determination and innovation were now standard curriculum taught to elite marksmen worldwide. "Extreme-range shooting is not just about making distant shots," Sarah told her students during their first lesson. "It's about pushing beyond conventional limitations, questioning accepted wisdom, and continuously striving for improvement. The same principles that allow us to hit targets at 5,000 meters can be applied to any challenge you face in your military careers." Rodriguez, now serving as Sarah's deputy, added his perspective for the students. "When Staff Sergeant Chen first joined our community, many of us questioned whether she belonged here. We were wrong, and our skepticism taught us an important lesson about the danger of limiting expectations based on assumptions rather than capabilities." The students listened intently, understanding that they were learning from someone who had fundamentally changed their profession. Sarah's achievements had proven that individual excellence, supported by rigorous preparation and innovative thinking, could overcome any institutional barrier. As the training session continued, Sarah watched her students practice the techniques that had once seemed impossible to their instructors. The methods she had developed through trial and error were now being passed on to a new generation of military professionals who would carry them even further. The girl who had once struggled to convince skeptical instructors that she belonged in sniper training had become the teacher that future generations would study and emulate. Her legacy was not just the techniques she had developed, but the example she had set for anyone facing doubt and opposition. Sarah's story,